Dan, are we good?
Are we good? Taneytown Planning and Zoning virtual meeting, please come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone that's participating in this presentation this evening and the guests. George, would you lead us in the pledge of the flag, please?
I will. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let the records reflect that all the members are present tonight. We have George, Barry, Judy, Holly, and Jim, and myself, along with attorney Jay and our zone administrator, Jim Weber. The commission members should have received the draft minutes of February the 24th, 2020. Is there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I found nothing.
George?
I found nothing.
I'm sorry, I still can. George, would you repeat that, please?
I found nothing in my minutes.
All right, in that case, I'll entertain a motion for exception or approval.
I motion.
Please go with thumbs up for approval. Okay, I got Barry, I got George. Ollie, I can't see you, and Jim, I can't. Jim, I got Ollie, I got Judy. Okay, all those opposed, thumbs down. Looks like it's unanimous. Thank you.
I did not catch who made the motion.
George made the note.
George? Yes.
George, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Just want to put a reminder out for anyone that may want to come on to be part of our meeting this evening. If you'd like to join us, you can come in by dialing 1-800-309-2350. Once you did that, your conference number is 237-7193. When it's your turn to speak or give your presentation, *5, which should put you on the air. Thank you. Our first delegation action items tonight is Tony Crossing, request for final site plan and plaque approval. Jim, would you like to lead us off on that, please?
Sure. We've been talking about this one for quite some time. Last time we met, we did approve the preliminary plan, the preliminary site development plan. We had some work to do on the plat notes. As you may recall, this one consolidates a number of parcels into two parcels, one on each side of Westview Drive. And the project will create semi-detached or duplex dwellings along with a 10-unit apartment building. As noted in my report, we have some water sewer master plan issues that we've requested assistance from the state to streamline things a little bit because of all the COVID delays and our inability to work through the normal processes for a water sewer master plan amendment. And the state has been receptive to that, and we have provided them with additional information. So we are anticipating their approval to allow the health department to sign the site development plan and the consolidation plat without the amendment being approved to the water and sewer master plan. So that's kind of catching things up on it. Jay has been working with Mr. Schaefer to fine tune the notes on the plat as far as which parcels are going where. The city will be getting the actual roadbed underlying Westview Drive, which was never deeded to the city when the road was built, and the city is going to give up what was deeded for the intended location of the road. So that's the land swap we've talked about. That's ironed out, and the mayor and council have already voted to release that former roadbed parcel. So we are in the position for conditional approval, basically. We just need to make sure that we've got the plat notes right, and I think as of this afternoon, that was finalized. And the last question is just, we have yet to receive final word from the Department of the Environment that they will authorize the health department to sign. But all indications are looking like they're going to work with us and make that happen.
So we're still looking for a final site plan, is that correct? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Jim, I didn't hear that.
Yes, final approval for the site development plan and the consolidation plat.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments before I ask for a motion? I have a couple things I did. Is everything squared away with the intersection of Harney Road and 140? As far as what we asked for and what the state agreed upon? Jay or Jim, would either one of you like to reply to that?
Jim,
Yes.
what is that that's running? Sounds like a barrel turning. What is that background noise?
What?
Not on my end.
No, I can, but I gotta go out in the hallway.
Did you hear?
Someone has something running in their house.
All right. Right, either Jim or Jay, are we okay with the state highway, okay with that intersection?
There was discussion of trying to realign the intersection, but state highway does not have none of us have right of way to be able to realign the intersection of 40 and 140, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
The state is going to get, if you take a look at and I'm not sure if everyone has the plat in front of them, but there is a parcel on West Baltimore Street right before you get to the intersection with Harney that's going to be deeded to the state for state highway. And then there are two parcels along Harney that will be deeded to the city for future expansion of the road or whatever we may need to do in there. So we're going to get right of way along Harney, and the state's going to get right of way along 140.
Okay,
But realigning the intersection is not going to happen.
okay. This has been going on now for quite a few months, and I can't remember what we covered
Sure.
back last year. When I went through the plans for the final time, I noticed that there's a crosswalk that goes between the two sections across Westview Drive. There's a crosswalk, but there isn't any lights as far as street lights. And I'm concerned about at night. I mean, with people coming from one side to the other side, it'd been nice to have a street light there. And would that be something for the town, or that would be for the developer? Because they do have a crosswalk marked there.
The streetlights were laid out based on, at least the ones along the road frontage were laid out based on the city's specifications. We can certainly work with them to fine tune that. If we want to try to move one closer to the crosswalk area, they were just put on there based on the distance between streetlights that's required by the city's specifications. But we certainly can work with Public Works and see if we can tweak that a little bit if we need to.
Okay. And the last thing is, were there going to be a community sign, or are they going to put in later on for a permit to put a sign up or anything like that?
The answer is yes.
We have a community sign.
Yes. Yeah, this is Clark Schaefer. Yes, we do have a community sign
It's on the plan.
that's on the plan, and we do intend to put one up, yes.
Okay, I guess I missed it on the plan because I couldn't find it. So is that part, if we pass this tonight in final approval, will that take care of the sign issue when they want to do the sign?
Yes, that'll take care of the sign if you pass it tonight.
Okay, good enough. Then if I don't hear any other comments, I'll entertain a motion for final approval of the site plan and the plaque approval.
I make a motion for a final approval on the site plan.
Okay, Ollie made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who seconded that?
Barry.
Barry. Okay. Any further discussion? Is there any, Bradley, is there any call-ins or any comments from the community or from the outside?
As of right now, there are no hands raised on the call list.
All right.
You're good to go.
With that, all those in favor of the motion for final approval, signify by thumbs up and keep them up to identify you. George, Barry, Judy, Ollie, Jim, okay. And myself, looks like it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a long haul. We appreciate working with the town on this, and I'm sure we'll be working with you as we go forward to put it on the ground. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Jim, we'll move to the next one. Courier Drive Lodge review of a special exceptions, use and variance request. Would you like to bring us up to speed on that?
Sure. This one also is another Mr. Schaefer item. These are the undeveloped lots towards the elementary school end of Courier Drive. When that community was built, it was along Courier Drive was originally all semi-detached or duplex dwellings. There are a couple single families right at the end there, but most of the community, when it developed, was done as semi-detached homes. The code currently in that zoning district, R7500, a semi-detached is a special exception. So you may recall a few years ago, the lot lines on these remaining undeveloped lots were adjusted somewhat to facilitate the footprint of a new dwelling on all of the lots. And two of the lots are laid out very well for a semi-detached home, but unfortunately it's for the owners, it's not a permitted use in the district anymore. So in order to build the semi-detached house, we have to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals, get the special exception, and then we can permit a semi-detached to go there. I believe there's a contingent purchaser that's interested in doing a semi-detached on those two lots, and I'll let Mr. Schaefer provide any more details if he likes.
I'm happy to. I'll try to be brief. Yes, Jim explained in a very condensed fashion and in an accurate fashion a somewhat complicated platting and zoning history for these properties, but the bottom line is that we have a contract purchaser, Ed Zepp, who plans to put a single family on lot 11A and a duplex on 12A and 12B. The setbacks we've asked for, the variances on, and the permissions we've asked for will enable him to put residential structures on there that are compatible and harmonious with the other properties in the neighborhood, not only in terms of general design and density, but also in terms of the setbacks. And so, and furthermore, the variances requested will frankly allow him to build a better, more expensive unit, because if he had to comply with some of these setbacks, he would not, frankly, he wouldn't buy them. He wouldn't build. He says he can't You can't do it. So he wants to build a certain quality structure, and he's able to do it with these permissions.
Okay.
So we'd appreciate your recommendation in favor, and then we'll, as you know, the process is that we then have to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals in a quasi judicial, on the record type public hearing, at which time we present in some detail our plans and testimony regarding the development.
Okay, so I gather with the setback, that's gonna put the new homes, once they're built, in the same line as the existing homes that are there now, the same setback? Is that
Well,
correct?
it looks like a couple of them are going to be slightly further back than the existing houses, based on the drawing that we've submitted. You can see it. I don't know if you have it in front of you there, but you can see as it runs down, you'll see existing house, further down the road. And you'll see they're about 32.5 feet from the property line. Ours are going to be required to be 35 feet from the property line. So they will be very similar, probably not noticeable from the general public, but they will be a little further back than a couple of the existing houses.
Okay. Jim, do you have any other comments on this?
As far as the front yard setback, it's an interesting scenario because the property that's on the corner, very close to these lots, the one right on the corner of Kings Drive and Courier Drive, is only shown as being 28.1 feet from Courier Drive. So the code actually allows us to split the difference in setbacks when there's an undeveloped lot between developed lots. But seeking the variance provides some assurance to the builder that he'll be able to do what he wants to do without it being a judgment call or subjective on my part. So I can certainly understand seeking the variance for that.
Okay, any comment from the commission? Do we want to give a favorable approval, or I'd like to do something?
Chairman Parker, do we want to check for any pending calls?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Bradley, do you have any calls on hold for us on this?
Mr. Chair, no one has signified a desire to speak. I believe you're good to proceed.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. Do I hear something?
I'll make a motion that it be approved.
Excuse me, that it'll be,
I will make a motion that the request be granted.
I second it.
okay, motion was made by George, second by Ollie. Any further discussion? Not hearing any comments from anyone else. All those that favor that motion signify with thumbs up. George, Barry, Ollie, Jim, Judy, thank you. And it looks like that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I'm going to try to figure out how to remove myself from the meeting. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Before we move on to the next one, I just want to remind everyone that's listening that if you want to be part of this conversation or this meeting tonight, you can do so by dialing 1-800-309-2350. Conference number would be 237-7193. And when you're given the chance to speak, *5. Thank you. Okay, Jim, you want to lead us on to the request for a site plan waiver for 4335 Old Taneytown Road, a landscape supply business?
Certainly. Property owners have located some Jersey walls there and bulk mulch supply. They held a what started as, I guess, a Mother's Day weekend plant and mulch sale without realizing the need to go before the Planning Commission with regard to a site development plan. Because there is no additional public infrastructure required, there's no subdivision involved, and no substantial buildings proposed, the site does qualify for a potential waiver of site plan requirements. So that's why it's before you tonight. We're a little bit of playing catch up here with this one, but since I made contact with the property owners when we became aware of what was going on there, they've moved the plant sale and most of the operation to the adjacent property where Thunderhead Bowl and Grill is. But there's still the bulk mulch remains at the other old Taneytown property. So the question before you is whether the landscape operation will go through the site plan process before they can continue to operate, or if a waiver is granted, they can present just basically a simplified plan, much as what's before you this evening, to then follow up with the appropriate zoning certificate and applicable building permits for the tenant fit out. And I should call to everybody's attention that there have been some concerns, and in your packet was a letter from an adjacent property owner, and we also did share some letters that were received today. So there certainly is some interest from neighboring property owners about this one. And the developers are on the meeting with us, so I will let them present the overview if we're ready for that, and kind of go from there.
Before we go to the developers there, or the property owners, this is zone general business,
Correct.
and before there was a service business, right? Aqua something,
Aqua Concepts, yes.
and did they operate a business out of there as service or what?
It was a service business, yes.
Okay, and now we want to go to a retail business,
Correct.
which is still permittable.
Still in general business, yes.
Okay. All right. If the gentleman's from the landscape, either one of them would like to speak, that would be Mr. We'll have the names again.
Murphy.
Murphy. If you would like to speak, please state your name and your address and go ahead. I can't hear you. Are you mute? I can't hear you.
Are we corrected now? Are we?
Yeah, can you speak a little louder, oh, please?
Yes, Mike Murphy, here with Mark Kraus. We are attempting to utilize a property that's jointly owned. I am owner of Aqua Concepts, Mark being owner of Thunderhead Bowl. Yes, we're trying to utilize the property for landscape supply, mainly flowers, mulch, bagged, and bulk. I have been in contact with the county. I think wastewater management was a concern that had come across either through Jim or through the calls from neighbors. I think, Jim, if I understand right, you had also made a call to the county and verified that they were not requiring one. Is that correct?
They indicated that there would not be a requirement for a stormwater discharge permit, provided mulch was not manufactured on the site.
Right,
That
as we understand.
sale of bulk mulch itself wouldn't require it's referred to as an NPDES permit.
Right. So basically, it's a weekend, Saturday and Sunday. We're obviously would, if there's an expansion beyond that, we would, of course, come back if there need be to reevaluate this or whatever the town would require. We're just, as of now, the property's vacant, and we're just trying to best utilize what we can in today's current marketplace. Weekend only, 9 to 5 is what the hours that we're trying to keep. We haven't actually run it till 5 in the evening at all. And we have not run anything out of that business as of yet. The mulch was dropped off there. Then we got wind, of course, that we had to go through all this. I think we, have tried to be attentive to any concerns. We did move it to the Link Center, and are waiting, obviously, till the outcome of this meeting to see where we move from there. So there, at this point, are no employees. It has been run by myself and my nephew. So there's no outside staff or anything that is needed for this operation.
Jim, can I come back to you and hear some more input from you as far as they're in the town limits, but the property that's concerned is out of town, right?
That's correct. And most of the concern has focused on potential runoff from the site or potential seeping into groundwater, as the adjacent property being in the county is on well and septic. And as some of the letters that were shared today from neighbors indicate, the adjacent property certainly is lower downgrade from the subject property here, and there's been some indication that water does sheet off of this property to the other. So there are concerns as to what could potentially be in that runoff that potentially could seep into groundwater and compromise the well on the property. And there were some septic system concerns as well. I don't know if Mr. Murphy or Mr. Kraus can speak to the condition of the septic on the property, or restrooms or things of that nature. I know those have been areas of concern from the adjacent property owner.
Go back to Mr. Murphy. Go ahead, please.
The house is not being utilized at all in this operation, of course, which is where the restroom or the septic would be tied into. We would look to put, portable facilities there if required. Like I said, at this point, we don't have any employees. So, but again, if it's required, we would look to do that. But the house was not being brought into this, or was not of any being utilized for this operation at all.
I have a question for Jim Parker.
Go ahead, George.
If this is a retail operation, what would be the requirements for water and sewer for a retail operation?
Jim, I'll put that back to you. Also, if they do retail, is a requirement about parking? So, Jim, you would.
So as far as let's see, parking, there appears to be adequate parking on the space. Before issuing a zoning certificate, certainly we would measure things out. The use is not our typical retail use. Our parking specs focus largely on square footage under roof of the retail space, and that typically drives the number of parking spaces. With this being weekend outdoor only use, it doesn't fit our typical mold. So in a situation like that, it's more of a judgment call as to the number of parking spaces that are going to be required. Certainly there is adequate space at the site for customer vehicles to park, but what I would like to hear a little more detail on is I guess the anticipated traffic circulation. It sounds like there's only going to be one or two, staff people on site at any given time, so staff parking is not really going to be an issue, and I don't imagine that we're going to need a grocery store size shopping or parking lot for it. But again, our parking regs are driven mostly by square footage. And with no building involved, that's kind of tough to predict.
Wouldn't the parking require paving?
Yes.
Usually right, they'd have to repave blacktop or some type of surface.
Jim, is the Morton building being utilized in this business that's there?
I'm sorry, Ollie, could you repeat that?
Is the large Morton building there, is that being used as part of the business? Because if it is, that should be considered into the plan.
The building that's on site is being used for storage. There was a drawing that was included that you should have that, everything has been, would be displayed outside on temporary displays that are set up and torn down at the end of every day is basically the way we've done it and would look to do it.
You're not using the Morton building then?
It's
The
for
whole
storage.
building or whatever you want to call it?
It's for storage at this point, correct?
For
So
storage
you're-
for the mulch or for other storage other than this business?
It is things, bagged potting soil and the flowers
Okay, so it is retail items.
Yes.
that are stored there from overnight, yes, till the next day, correct.
Okay, can I get back to you, Jim? If a site plan waiver would be granted, what would be their next step?
Okay. They would apply for a new business zoning certificate. Part of that certificate is always including a tenant fit out building permit with the county. This would be certainly an unusual situation if there's not going to be any use of the building on site. Generally, when there's a building and it's going to be occupied, it has to have a restroom, whether there's just one person there or many. And of course, that number of fixtures is driven by the number of employees. I would be hesitant to recommend allowing a porta pot. We've run into issues when we've allowed that, even on a temporary basis with other sites, that temporary turned into rather lengthy times with a porta pot being operated on the commercial site or being used on the commercial site. So I was hoping that the sketch plan that was submitted would have detailed a little bit more of where the paved parking area was. And perhaps Mr. Murphy could speak to how large that paved parking area is with regard to the number of, vehicles that can park on the pavement there.
Right now, the majority of the parking lot is what I would consider crusher run, and it's roughly 60 wide by 100 deep is what we had measured off as parking. As far as asphalt, I would not know I'd have to measure that. I did not measure anything that was, it's not substantial though.
Okay.
I have another question for Jim.
Okay, George, go ahead.
Are we definitely saying then that for an operation like this, water and sewer is not required at all?
We require any new building to connect to the city systems. In a situation like this, it's certainly unusual not to have restroom facilities for employees, even though there are only going to be one or two, and I guess technically they're owners, not employees. With only one or two people on site, it sounds like a rather small scale operation, but it is unusual not to have restroom facilities on a commercial site. With this not being operated out of a building, it is very unusual. And again, our code tends to look at things based on construction of new buildings and construction of new facilities and paved areas and things of that nature. So it gets challenging when we're talking about waivers and things that aren't really building any new structures and things of that nature, but the use is changing. And the reason it's before you is because there's a potential difference in the intensity of the use between a retail business and a service business. I don't think we're looking at something that's going to require uh, large scale things like traffic studies and things like that by any means. But it is a potential change in the intensity of the site between the service business and the retail traffic coming and going and customers being on site.
I just raised this question because I know Taneytown is really concerned about water and sewer for every site. And I just want to make sure that these folks don't go in there without water or sewer and get themselves in trouble down the road.
Is there a requirement from the town after a certain length of time that they should be hooked up to the water and sewer?
That would be something contingent on their annexation agreement. Generally, when a property annexes and there's an existing building on the site, they are allowed to continue using a private well or private septic system until such time as the city system reaches the property. So we do have a number of properties, primarily residential properties, that remain on either well or septic or both, where the city infrastructure just has not reached that particular building yet. The property here is served by city water, but remains on a private septic system. So that's I have not seen the annexation agreement. I don't know how long this property has been in city limits. Well over 30 years, I'm sure.
That
So
property.
Jim, I have a question.
Okay, Barry,
Yeah, do I understand, Jim, or
can you talk up a little bit?
sorry, Jim, do I understand correctly? You're saying that there is no requirement for an environmental impact, given that they're going to be doing bulk mulch that's got chemicals that are involved in it that could be involved in runoff. There's no requirement to do some kind of an environmental impact.
That's something that would be part of a site development plan. There would be condition, one of our standard comments with site development plans is to provide details on the storage for any materials that could leach or seep into groundwater, potentially causing contamination, as well as storage of other chemicals that may be on the site. So that is part of the site plan review process, would be to speak specifically to those sorts of items. And the developer is typically required to either confirm that they are not going to have any materials of that nature on the site, or they have to provide details on how they're going to properly store those materials so that it does not pose a threat to groundwater or soil contamination or anything like that.
Just thinking about our past projects that went through planning zoning, just up the street there on East Balmer Street with the garage and the car slot, and then going Frederick Street down at the other end with issues. I can't see how we can go forward with not requiring a site plan.
May I interject?
You sure can.
Okay, thank you. Mark Kraus, Thunderhead Bowl, and Murphy's Choice. Appreciate you letting me speak. Just to kind of give some background and clarify where we're going with this, what we're asking for is just a temporary thing to try to do something to bring some income, being as the bowling center is still shut down. And any future plans, and we were working with this to try to bring something more permanent there. And if we were able to succeed and work with the town to do that, the access to the sewer goes through Thunderhead Bowl, which I'm the owner. That was the issue before with other plans that were in the works that weren't able to come to fruition because they had to go through Thunderhead Bowl, and they wanted to do that for free, and I wasn't willing to do that. In the process, Mike came to me, and then I became the new partner from Norval Bowen. So we have longer term, more permanent plans there that we would definitely love to work with the city on and get, we already have the water there, but take the septic out of it and go to sewer. But I can't do that without somebody going in there. I don't have the wherewithal to sink that money, repave, especially with not knowing who the tenant may or may not be. So what we're trying to do in the interim is just run something low scale, temporary, and then move forward when the economy comes back to where we're able to do something. And I just wanted to give that background. I'm not looking for like a waiver forever. That's not what we're here for. We're just trying to make ends meet in the short term and then work to get a more permanent solution there that's agreeable to everyone. And I thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments? If not,
If I had just a question, is there any way that we can get this done while also alleviating the concerns of the neighbor? I mean, she does have valid concerns with the runoff and stuff like that. Is what can we do to make sure that she gets the answers she needs to make her more, I don't know.
In the information that we provided, sorry about that. There was information on the mulch. The mulch was chosen specifically because of the way it was made and the fact that it is environmentally we'll say friendly, but it's the information is there on the mulch itself. I know that in the past, I think there is some legitimate concerns about the way mulch was made, or maybe still today, and some of the certain manufacturers may use hazardous stuff. That isn't, that this mulch company was chosen obviously we didn't want to have an issue. We didn't, even before this came up. We did propose in there, one of the drawings shows where the mulch is today. We certainly, if it helped the situation move forward, we kind of drew a secondary map that showed moving the mulch piles farther away from the edge of the property. I don't know if it would look for any, there was another solution that was thrown out, where you could see on the property that it made sense. We would certainly look to help the situation. We're not trying to create any issues at all, neighbors or otherwise.
Right. And then I understand that, except, we can't really, I can't see elevations on here, so I don't know specifically how that water is going to run off. Oops, my bad. But I guess it's, it's different having the mulch in your yard and then actually having it in your water source. If you know what I mean? So what can we do to make sure that she is, got zero concerns that's going to be the issue? I mean, it's impossible to do without a formal site plan.
And again, I know our property is like a plateau above where Mrs. Weeks is at, the adjoining neighbor. Of course, I'm looking at it one way, she's looking at it in another. I don't know how to say that. I don't see that the mulch piles per se, other than what they're made with, is affecting the water flow. The water flow is going to be there whether we utilize the property or not. Moving the piles farther away would of course be the easiest. But I don't, that would be something you'd have to, I guess, approve or whatever. Like I said, there is a picture in there, if you look, that had them moving, I guess that's roughly 60 feet from where they are, 50 to 60 feet from where they currently sit.
Okay.
And I'll
Did
just.
that answer, Judy, did that answer your question for the moment?
Kind of, but if you could kind of go a little further, I mean, she does have real concerns.
Yes.
Right, and I kind of agree with you, but go ahead, Jim.
And certainly I am neither a hydrogeologist or an engineer to really be able to promise that nothing bad could happen here. That's again part of what we do with the site development plan. Because we don't have the in-house expertise, we rely on the city consultant engineer and the hydrogeologist and those folks to tell us that that what's proposed is going to work and is not going to adversely affect other properties. So I cannot, promise that nothing bad could happen. And I understand that the mulch that's being stored on the site today is, and I think the materials sheet was included in your packet, so you could see that, that specifically says that it has a column for, hazardous materials, and there are none in this particular mulch. But thinking to your question, Judy, it, should a waiver be granted? It is unusual for it to be a temporary situation like is being explained here. Generally, if we waive the site plan requirements per the city code, that's it. There's no going back from that. And that use is permitted to be ongoing thereafter, as long as it stays in use or continues in use. And with that in mind, we don't have a way to monitor who's bringing mulch in, what company's bringing mulch in, what the contents of the mulch will be. And I'm not trying to suggest that the property owners are going to do a bait and switch or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that, but from the city's standpoint, we don't have the ability to monitor that. So it really is kind of on good faith that, that material would always be the same material and not something from a different manufacturer down the road. So I suppose it's very, I can't sit here and say that there's no way something could contaminate groundwater.
So you just said,
Hold on, George.
Jim Parker, can I make a statement?
All right, just to keep a little bit more format here, if you want to speak, please raise your hand or use your little icon.
Thank you.
Go ahead, George.
Jim, you just said that this would be a permanent decision and not a temporary decision. Is there no chance that this could be reviewed over a certain period of time that to check to see if things are going okay? You just said that if we grant a waiver, there's no stopping it then. That makes it permanent.
Maybe that's a good move now for Jay to make a comment on this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To step back and look at what we're talking about, we've always run into issues where one use becomes a different use. The scope increases either in size or intensity. And then we come back and say, well, we didn't have anything to measure it against because we waived the plan up front. And I'm not saying that we need a plan or not. I'm just saying that without a concrete plan up front, you don't have anything to go back, as to George's point, and say, you're not doing it the way you said. When you're talking about, hey, things should be moved from here to there without a plan, even if you'd waive portions of it down the road, you don't have anything solid because all you have is a zoning certificate and a building permit when you're done. So, you've gone down that road before. One of the issues that you really have to look at here is the temporary nature of this. Even if it's temporary, the city doesn't review this, George. We don't come back and say it's temporary and now we're going to give you 6 months. You had that issue happen where we're selling buildings down the street on Baltimore Street, where it wasn't going to be one thing and then there were more buildings and they started encroaching, and then you all asked, well, did they get permission to do that? And it was kind of built into the earlier permission. I'm wondering, I hear the discussion about waiver or not. I'm wondering whether the plan that's submitted is something that you need to study a little bit more to find out, does that create the benchmark? Because if that's the plan that they're locked into and they seem to be okay with it, the city could be okay with it, and then you don't have to go through a process. But all the things that Jim and Judy talked about where they had questions, those are the process. I mean, that's what the process is for, but some of it is kind of irrelevant. So maybe there could be an expedited type of thing or a streamlined process. Jim can maybe answer that.
Well, I'm thinking along that same line, Jim.
Sure.
That building in the back someday could be utilized into a part of the system too. Could be made a building where retail people would go in. Anything could happen to that site down the road.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add one more thing, not to throw any more problems here, but one of the things you have tried to do on a policy level with any application is you've tried to have any improvement on the property, make the property more compliant with what the city is, the code. And so one of the things you want to think of, and maybe it's not now, because I heard the applicants say, we're not going to spend money to put sewer in if there's no use, but maybe there's a way that you could come up to an arrangement so that sewer could service the property, in part of this type of thing. Because as you think of every time you deal with a property, you ask it to upgrade to water and sewer, you ask upgrade to the parking standards. This one would be, there would never need to be an upgrade if it stayed exactly like it was. And they've said, yeah, if we're going to change, we need to come in and upgrade. And that's obvious. But maybe that's something in the middle we could reach, an agreement that actually ties it in, saying you can do these things, but then we expect this in writing if X ever occurs. So it's not maybe it'll happen, it will happen if that. And that maybe gives everybody some thought.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Maybe now's the time. Mr. Mayor, do we have any call-ins on this topic?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe we do have one. I believe it is Ms. Mary Weeks, who you have a letter from. So I'm going to unmute her and give her an opportunity to speak, if you will.
All right.
Ms. Weeks, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can everyone hear her okay?
If I can ask you to try to keep this within 3 to 5 minutes or less, I'd appreciate it, and kind of get to the point. Go ahead, please.
Okay, my name is Mary Weeks. I live at 4327 Old Taneytown Road. I live beside of the 4335 Old Taneytown Road, where an illegal mulch yard was put in town limits, allowed to be open since Mother's Day on weekends. I am in the county on a good private well. On May 1st, Mr. Murphy installed 13 Jersey walls. Within 7 days, they had 1 tractor trailer of bagged mulch, 2 tractor trailer loads of bulk mulch. The bulk mulch was put on my property line. They are higher, I am lower. All runoff comes on me. This will run through mulch and sit in ponds at my well till the rain stops and storm drain stops backing up. Fountain Valley Analytical Services basic water test is $645. For bulk mulch is $2,000. My lawyer and Matt Shipley from the Carroll County Health Department have urged me to get a $2,000 test. Mulch can contain copper, arsenic, creosote, and chemicals used in pressure-treated wood. Even if Mr. Murphy says his wood is safe, he also told me he could put this business in with no permits. Who will check that? I think putting this in during the pandemic when town offices were closed is reprehensible behavior. The aquifers that supply my well are at Carroll Vista. I could walk there behind my property. Why would the town take that liability? I strongly oppose this mulch yard now that I have talked to Matt Shipley at the health department, who told me to get the $2,000 sightline water test. He also told me the septic system dates to 1946, which a parking lot was built on and tractor trailers have been on. Who would bring that code? They are annexed into the town, but never hooked into town sewer. Only business general property, not on town sewer. The septic system beside of me sits at a higher elevation than my property. Will this business require a bathroom and running water for patrons and employees? Who will inspect this, the town or the health department? I have opened 2 salons in the Taneytown area, both zoned business general at the time. I had to go through a costly process, zoning hearing, putting in required septic system. When I outgrew the first location at 4317, I built 4327. Again, zoning hearing, elaborate septic pumped to back of my 5 acres well in the front does not adversely affect my neighbors. My private well has supplied the beauty bar for 40 years in my family. My opposition is because I worry the mulch will contaminate the soil and runoff would ruin my well. I think every business should go through an equal process. I have tried to do the best that I could do to protect myself and my neighbors' wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wance.
Weeks.
Glass, sorry. Brad and Mr. Wance, is there anyone else?
Mr. Chair, there is no one else waiting to speak.
All right. Any more comments from the commission, or is there a recommendation or a motion from the commission?
Just one more question. Is it, if we do an expedited site plan, since obviously they aren't going to need all of that thing, is there any reason why, and I kind of caught they were selling plants and stuff from the bowling alley parking lot or from that side? I mean, is there anything that keeps them from continuing that part of the business while we work on taking care of the other address?
From my perspective, the idea of it being a short-term thing was fine. Having the Mother's Day plant sale and a kind of short-term weekend thing pop up on an existing commercial site, similar to a farmer's market or some other event. For it to be an ongoing use, considering the Thunderhead site has a very expansive parking lot, and I don't know if the restroom facilities are open for employees or patrons or anything at this point for the weekend sales. But with there being the restaurant incorporated there, I'm guessing restrooms are probably available. But it kind of comes down to that accessory use question, really. And I do tend to be pretty lenient on that if somebody's doing retail sales of one item and they add another product line, we don't make people come back in and get a new zoning certificate because now they're selling a different type of merchandise than was originally envisioned. If it doesn't change the basic premise of the operation, we usually just let it go on, and say, well, the business is growing, they're selling additional merchandise. In this situation, it's a little bit different in that it's a, bowling alley, bar and grill use as opposed to a retail use. So it technically, with building code, that's a different building code usage. But again, we've got stuff happening outside and not in the building. So it's very much a gray area. And I have received some criticism for allowing the temporary weekend sales to go on at the site, because it is a bowling alley and grill and not a retail establishment. So it's not something I would want to see go on in perpetuity. I'll end with that.
All right, thank you, Jim. There again, looking for some type of motion or recommendation. Is anyone ready to make it? If not, I'll make it to get it on the floor. I'll make a motion that a site plan be required for continuous use of this property. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, motion is made by myself and seconded by Barry. We're open for discussion. Give me a favor. I haven't heard any comments on your side.
I think my biggest concern is the septic system. maybe we need to have some kind of a drawing that shows where the septic is and what it is, so that we can make sure that people at Taneytown are safe from pollution.
Site plan would bring all that out in the open, I believe. Any other comments?
I don't know if I can be seen or not. Our screen doesn't show it. So, Mike Murphy, I don't know if you.
Yes, we can see you.
Again, our goal is this is being owner operated to get interest. Actually, we're trying to utilize a vacant property. Our goal is to spawn this into what I'd like to have. There is a hardware store. It's been a long time. Talk within the town, talk, any person that comes in contact with me. I've been part of that property now for 15 years. That was always talking, whether it been with the old property, my old partner in that property, or now Mark Krause. Obviously, we're trying to gauge the interest and work. A hardware store is, obviously a very expensive endeavor. We have to start somewhere. We're trying to get interest. All of that goes back to, we would definitely look to, the end goal is to get that property hooked into the septic and move forward. We're not trying to put a tenant in there, or the sewer, I'm sorry, the sewer. We're not trying to put a tenant in there and do all this. We are working as owner operated to grow this to a point where it's feasible, financially feasible to, and obviously if I could tell you how many cars come in there, I know that the use of the bowling alley parking lot is only a temporary thing, one way or another, whether you permit it and we were to continue. Obviously, Mark wants the bowling alley back open. It was never intended to be a long-term solution. It was just to work to go through the proper channels to get this allowed back at the adjoining property. But the end goal is we're trying to, we would like to see this grow into a more permanent thing. It's the word temporary comes up, and I don't want that to be, like I said, we're not sticking a tenant in there to do this. This is definitely owner operated, trying to better the property and eventually have a major improvement to that property. And with the city's help, hopefully, or obviously to get the septic hooked up would be sounds like or sewer, yes, to help everybody. I know, just in my dealings with that, it has always why it ended where it did. Harry Doherty couldn't answer that. I've had many talkings with him of why the water got hooked up and ended there. I think that's still a mystery, but it was before my lifetime, I guess. But we're trying to do this as a positive step. I'm very upset that we upset anybody. Obviously, understand concerns. We're just trying to address them any way we can, and are open to whatever we would need to do to alleviate her concerns, or anyone's for that matter. But we're trying to make this a permanent fixture on a much bigger scale is the bigger goal out of all this.
Well, thank you. We appreciate any business that comes to Taneytown, but we want to make sure that everyone's interest and concern is covered. So anyone else, any other comments before I call for the vote? Okay. All those in favor of the motion requiring a site plan approval signify by saying aye, or no, thumbs up, sorry, thumbs up. Okay, I got Barry.
Repeat the motion again.
The motion is made and second to require a site plan for any operation on this site. And that was second. Am I correct, Jim, on that?
That was the motion, yes.
Oh.
Require
All
the
those in favor of that motion, signify with thumbs up. Barry, Judy, Jim. Like George, I can't see your hand. Okay, so we are 1, 2, 3, and myself, that's 4. Those opposed, thumbs down. Okay,
How about abstain?
okay, sustained. Molly sustained, okay. Thank you. Motion passed. I asked Mr. Murphy and those to work with Jim on whatever is required to get this business up and running for you.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Tannery Barn, 61 Frederick Street. A request to eliminate the turnaround. Jim, would you fill us in on that?
Okay. Yes. So in your packet was, and I'm trying to find mine here, and I apologize, the scale was kind of small. We're kind of limited as to what I can print out here these days. But there's 2 pages that were in your packet. The first is kind of an overall site plan with some highlighting on it that shows the proposed location of the pergola behind the pavilion addition to the barn structure. And that, as you can see, is right about where the turnaround would begin. The turnaround was originally intended for the shuttle bus that's going to be used in conjunction with events at the site. And the second page is just a quick SketchUp rendering of the pergola structure. This obviously just shows sections of it. The pergola itself would be much bigger, as you can see from the highlighted portion of the site plan. So while this does not represent a significant departure from the approved site plan, it was not something that Chairman Parker and I were comfortable approving as a red line change, because we did have a lot of discussion about the turnaround area, and there actually was a note on the site plan regarding the turnaround that it was to be paved within 2 years of issuance of a use and occupancy permit. So there are some pros and cons to it. If the turnaround area is not required, that would be that much less impervious area on the site and less stormwater management concerns, less runoff from the reduced impervious area. And certainly the pergola provides a nicer aesthetic than more blacktop does. So certainly there's some benefit to making the change. But again, because we have had a number of changes regarding the site plan as it's gone through the process, it wasn't something Chairman Parker and I were comfortable with doing on our own without the knowledge of the Planning Commission. And Mr. Parker, I don't know if you want to turn things over to Ms. Clausen at this point or add anything.
Yes. Victoria, would you like to give a presentation about it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, for considering our request. So, as you know, this, unfortunately, it's been an evolving project. It's not something that we plan for it, but the positive is we just want to make it right. We want to make sure this is a venue that is actually going to be a highlight of Taneytown. It's going to bring the business, and it's going to bring good customers to Taneytown and help economically, not just to us, but the whole community. So as we continue development, there are certain things that happened that made us lead to this kind of decision and idea to create the pergola in the backyard. First, our driveway in the parking lot is a little larger right now. So since we had a couple test events in the fall, we pretty much figured out that there's a plenty of space for the shuttle to turn around on the front parking lot. So shuttle never went back for any of the events. So in terms of practicality, we don't really need to have cars go towards the back. Also for aesthetics, it will allow us to create more like a courtyard setting where we can extend the outdoor area and again, make this place a little bit more attractive to the customers. It also will create, like Jim mentioned, much less impervious surface. So we've done a lot of work to remediate all the runoff and everything, and I've been in contact constantly with our neighbor. So he agreed that there's no problems right now whatsoever. We added to landscaping, added some willows, plants that are good for the water areas. So we're trying to do the right thing aesthetically and environmentally, and make sure that the business is sustainable. So, but again, we wanted to make sure that we are 100% open with you about our plans, ideas, and we wanted to make sure that we present the idea to you, and hopefully you will approve that and agree that this change to the plans it's not because we want to get out of something that we need to do, but it's because we really want to make sure that the property is used better and safer for the people, etc.
What's the size? What's the physical size of it?
The size of the pergola, so on the gravel driveway that we're still planning to have in the back of the property, the pergola is going to have only 5 feet depth, and then it's going to create more like an entrance into the garden area where the turnaround was supposed to be. And the opening, we're still going to keep to about 12 feet. So in case of emergency, a vehicle can go through. And the pergola is only going to be on the side. So there's not going to be any roof or anything like that. It's just a simple aesthetics type thing. So we're going to string some cafe lights between the tannery and the pergola. Again, it's just more like a garden element. It's nothing really big and heavy in terms of structure. I think it's, and it's going to be black, so it's going to blend in. So aesthetically, it's going to complement the tannery really well.
Okay. Any comments from commissioner members? George?
Where was the turnaround area going to be?
It was supposed to be past the pergola on that little kind of like at the bottom of the hill where the corner of the property is. So if you look at the site plan, kind of follow the pergola and right through the gate, that's where the turnaround was supposed to be.
I went in on the site one day this past week. There were 2 cars pulled into the house, and there was tight quarters just to turn around and go back out on the present site right now. It was
Was
only,
that in the back, was that in the back, George, or was that along the side where the paved parking is?
unless I missed something, it's only paved right to the back corner of the property, of the building.
Right.
And there was 2 cars pulled in along the side of the property, the building, and there was only a space to go behind the vehicles to turn, and it was tight just for 2 cars sitting there. I don't see how you could get another turnaround in there.
Well,
I think the request is to eliminate the turnaround.
Right.
Period.
I understand.
correct. And our idea is not to have any parking. So the only parking that would be on site during events is the one ADA spot if needed. But there won't be any cars on the parking lot during the event. So the only vehicle that's going to be turning around is the shuttle.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to point out that following some of the changes that have occurred throughout the evolution of the project, we did, you might recall, we did an amended public works agreement for the tannery barn, and one of the items on there was that once the use and occupancy certificate is issued, that Victoria will have as-built drawings provided, and because we have seen some changes to the site. So as far as the note that's on the plat, we already are expecting as-built drawings, so we can redline the note on the plat with regard to the turnaround and certainly strike the turnaround area so that we have an accurate depiction of the end product, which is the whole purpose of the as-built drawings. So we do have a mechanism already in place to sort of memorialize the change.
Just want to point out, I'm not opposed to what you want to do. I just didn't want to make a decision without the commission being there to support it.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate, and you know, again, we just want to be transparent. We know that we had some bumps in the road, and I personally told you that I'm going to be involved in every step, and we're going to be communicating clearly. So Jim can attest to it. If there's any question, if there is any thoughts or idea, he's the first person I call him. Just make sure that we're following all the rules and there's no surprises for anybody.
So I'm looking for a motion here or comment.
Jim,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the request to eliminate the turnaround.
And I'll second it.
I'd second that.
Okay, Barry, who got that? Barry or Ollie?
I did.
Second. Okay.
That doesn't look like it's that big of a deal to get rid of. And cars actually shouldn't be back there.
Any other comments? Mayor, is there anyone waiting to make a comment?
Mr. Chair, there is nobody waiting to make a comment.
Okay, thank you much. All those in favor of that motion signify by thumbs up. I see Barry, I see George, Ollie, Judy, Jim, myself. Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Victoria. Sorry we kept you waiting so long.
No worries. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you
Ready.
for putting me in. Really
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, it looks like the agenda is cut short with all the other things. So Jim, unless you got any special comments, we'll just move on.
We plan on our next meeting being on Monday, June 29th at our normal time.
Normal
But-
time at a different location, or what are we doing? Are we gonna be able to get down to the police station, or maybe the carnival ground, or do we want to go back to what we're doing now? I would prefer, if Meach Crossing's coming in, to be a little bit more flexible with being able to proceed through that, and to be able to do it virtual like tonight. Are they anticipating coming in soon?
They are. Speaking with Steve Smith, the developer, last week, he is hoping that we will be able to take some action in July. I have not read the results or I did not have a chance to see the governor this afternoon or read the executive orders that followed his press conference. So I'm not sure exactly where we stand on group size and what the next stage. I understand we've moved to the next stage towards reopening, but I do not know the details of that yet to know if we can have an in-person meeting or not. So how about if we plan for the date and the normal time, and then as we learn more or as the situation evolves, we'll decide if we can meet in person or not.
Okay, I think this went fairly well this evening for being our first shot at this, at least my first shot like this. So this is what we need to do. This is what we'll need to do. So does any other members have any comments?
I have one.
Mr. Glass? Ollie?
Mead Crossing is coming in, maybe I'm out of place here. They're coming in for what?
Should be section 2. Is that correct? Section 2?
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, one thing I've always harped on, and I would like for everybody to do between now and then or anytime, ride out to the townhouses and see where you can park or what's going on. I think we ought to rethink what we did when we approved that particular thing with no extra parking. Thank you.
Right. George? George?
Yeah, I have a question. At our February 24th meeting, our commission made a motion to send a recommendation to the mayor and city council that they establish a committee to study the development of a highway beltway around the city, and that the effort should begin now during Governor Hogan's term. I've listened to all the mayor and council meetings, pardon me, on YouTube, and I haven't heard one word about this since then. And I was hoping that we could probably suggest the kind of a highway group of people to make this committee up, from the county commissioners, delegate to the state, senator to the state, especially a state highwayman, all these people to serve on a committee to discuss with Governor Hogan this highway beltway around Taneytown. We know what the problem is now, and we know what it's going to be in 15 years with the potential that's coming to Taneytown. And I would wonder if our liaison from our council to the commission could tell us what's the story on this.
Well, George, to be honest, I was going to say, Bradley may be able to jump in here. There's a lot of conversations that go on about that. But we're at a place where we can talk about it all day long, but we can't build roads on property we don't own. So there's still a lot that needs to be discussed, but you know, right now it's kind of just a pipe dream until we can get some more concrete, I don't even know how to put it. Bradley has brought it up with, I'm sure, the other entities. Oh, you know, I know you were talking about our county reps and everything like that, but there's only so much that we can do. And Bradley, you go ahead and let him know what you've got.
So thank you. The discussion's been ongoing in the background. The problem is, once we start entertaining putting together a committee, we get hit with a pandemic that prevents people from meeting face to face, which has also tied up the time of, you know, senators and delegates, things like that, that we would want to, you know, speak to about it specifically. So being able to get an audience with them about anything non-pandemic has been very difficult. So it was put on the back burner until times improve and we can actually have people meet in person and get somewhere with this. I had put together a committee on a different topic, and they've had to delay their work as well because of the current issues. So it's still in my mind, it's still at the forefront. Just unfortunately, with how the times are, we haven't been able to make a whole lot of movement on that. But I appreciate you bringing it up, and I promise you, it's going to come forward again. Okay.
Well, I know that this is a problem, Mayor, that is not going to go away. We have members of the town council, I know, that are concerned about our traffic. And I don't know of any problem that might be more important to our city than the control of our traffic. And I certainly hope that you don't drop this, but it's so important to put members with clout on this committee that's going to get together, and that they have the sole responsibility to work with highway only and not a lot of other business. This should be a highway committee. Delegate, senator, county commissioner, state highway people to meet with the governor, who is friendly. Our governor is friendly. The next one might not be as friendly. Just don't forget us.
Right, I understand. And right now we're looking at a major issue where our highway user revenues are going to be severely impacted by this pandemic. We're looking at the next probably 2 budget cycles being a big hurdle for us. But I hear where you're coming from, and I promise you I'm on board with your thought process. All right.
Just remember, traffic is going to keep coming.
Absolutely, until we get flying cars. You're right.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
everyone for their input. At this time, if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got it. Thank you, folks.
Bye, everybody.